In 1823, a fur trapper named Hugh Glass was mauled by a grizzly bear in the Dakota Territory, left for dead by his own crew, and crawled 200 miles to safety on a broken leg. He became a legend, but the survival methods that made him famous? Following them today could actually get you killed. Glass survived on desperation, not good technique. He packed gunpowder into his wounds, ate rotting buffalo carcass he stole from wolves, and set his own broken leg with no tools. People heard that story and assumed his methods were smart. They weren't. They were last resorts from a man with zero other options. But those tricks became campfire gospel, got passed down through generations, showed up in Hollywood westerns, and now millions of people think they know exactly what to do in a survival emergency. The science says otherwise. And for some of these, the difference between the old way and the right way is the difference between walking out of the woods and being carried out in a bag. Number 1. Sucking venom from a snakebite. This one has been around since the days of the fur trade, and it absolutely will not die. A rattlesnake strikes a trapper's ankle somewhere in the sagebrush hills of Wyoming, and his buddy whips out a knife, cuts an X over the fang marks, and starts sucking out the venom. You've seen it in every Western ever made, from the old John Wayne pictures to Jeremiah Johnson. The mountain men who trapped beaver along the Missouri River carried this technique as gospel. Some of them even carried special suction devices made from hollowed-out animal horn, convinced they could pull the poison right out through the skin. The problem is, venom doesn't sit politely in one spot waiting to be extracted. It spreads through the tissue almost immediately, absorbing into the lymphatic system faster than any human mouth can pull it out. By the time you've scored the skin with a blade, that venom is already deep into the bloodstream. Cutting into the wound just creates a bigger opening for bacteria from your saliva to enter, which means now you've got a snake bite and a wound infection on top of it. Researchers at Stanford's Emergency Medicine Department confirmed that victims who attempt venom extraction typically end up with worse outcomes than those who leave the bite alone. The correct approach is straightforward. Keep the bitten limb below heart level, remove any rings or tight clothing near the bite, stay calm to keep your heart rate low, and get to a hospital. Skip the cutting. Forget the suction. Just move toward medical help as quickly as you can. But venom wasn't the only thing mountain men got dangerously wrong about what to put in their bodies. Number 2. Eating raw snow for water. Rocky Mountain trappers in the 1830s ate snow constantly during winter trapping season. Made sense to them. Snow is frozen water. You're thirsty. Eat the snow. But snow is roughly 90% trapped air and only about 10% actual water. You'd need to eat about 10 quarts of snow just to get 1 quart of water into your stomach, and every handful you eat drops your core body temperature. In conditions cold enough for snow to exist, that temperature drop can push you from uncomfortable to hypothermic faster than most people realize. Your body burns calories trying to warm that ice in your stomach, which means you're spending energy to get less hydration than you think. The trappers who did this regularly had bodies conditioned by years of brutal frontier living. Most of us don't have that kind of baseline resilience. Always melt snow first. Use a fire, body heat, a dark container in the sun, whatever you've got. Eating it raw in freezing conditions is working against your own survival. And speaking of things that feel like they're helping, but are actually making things worse. Number 3. Drinking whiskey to stay warm. At the Rocky Mountain Rendezvous, where 400 or more fur trappers gathered every summer in places like the Green River Valley in Wyoming, whiskey flowed like river water. These were wild, month-long trading camps where men who'd spent the entire year alone in the mountains would come together to sell their beaver pelts, resupply, gamble, fight, and drink themselves blind. The fur companies sold watered-down frontier liquor at enormous markups, sometimes charging 10 times the St. Louis price. And when winter hit the high country and temperatures dropped well below zero in the shadow of the Wind River Range, a flask of cheap whiskey was considered essential cold weather gear. You take a swig, you feel that burn spreading through your chest and into your stomach, and you genuinely believe the cold just lost the fight. But alcohol dilates blood vessels near the surface of your skin. That rush of warmth you feel is actually your core heat escaping through your skin faster than normal. Your internal temperature is dropping while your brain is convinced you're warming up. In sub-zero conditions along the Continental Divide, that disconnect between what you feel and what's actually happening inside your body is exactly how people freeze to death while genuinely believing they're comfortable. Hypothermia sneaks up on you, and alcohol makes it sneak faster. Hot tea, broth, or even just warm water is what actually helps in cold conditions. The whiskey flask belongs back at base camp, not on the trail in January. The whiskey gave them a false sense of warmth, but the next trick on this list gave them a false sense of safety. Number 4. Building a fire inside a cave. Trappers and frontiersmen found caves all through the Rockies and the Appalachian Range, and the logic was obvious. Stone walls block the wind, a roof keeps off the snow. Light a fire inside, and you've got yourself a warm shelter for the night. But heat causes rock to expand. And when rock expands unevenly, especially in limestone and sandstone caves common across Appalachian country, it fractures. Inside a cave, that means chunks of ceiling can break loose and fall on you while you sleep. On top of that, smoke from a fire inside an enclosed cave has nowhere to go. It pools against the ceiling and slowly fills the space, and carbon monoxide buildup can knock you unconscious before you even realize something is wrong. You fall asleep thinking you're safe and warm, and you simply never wake up. If you find a cave, build your fire at the entrance, not inside. Or better yet, build a proper fire reflector wall outside and sleep between the fire and a rock face. That's how experienced woodsmen have done it for centuries, and it works without the risk of your shelter collapsing on your head. And if the cave fire didn't get them, the cold certainly did, because the frontier remedy for frostbite was almost as dangerous as the frostbite itself. Number 5. Rubbing frostbitten skin with snow. This one came straight out of Appalachian folklore and frontier medicine, and it hung around for well over 100 years. The idea was that slowly introducing cold to frostbitten fingers or toes would ease them back to normal, the way you might slowly adjust to cold water instead of jumping in. Trappers working the frozen beaver streams of the northern Rockies dealt with frostbite constantly. It was one of the most common injuries of the fur trade, right alongside broken bones and animal attacks. William Ashley's expeditions up the Missouri River in the early 1820s lost men to frostbite-related complications nearly every winter. The standard treatment was to rub the affected area with snow or dunk it in cold water, and if that didn't work, the trapper's companions would hold the frozen fingers near an open flame. Both approaches are dangerous. Frostbitten skin already has ice crystals forming inside the tissue at the cellular level. Rubbing snow on it drives those crystals deeper, lacerating cells and causing even more damage. And soaking frostbitten extremities in hot water or holding them near a roaring fire creates a sudden temperature change that can send someone into shock and cause tissue death from the rapid expansion. The correct approach is slow, gentle rewarming. Lukewarm water, around 104 degrees Fahrenheit, applied gradually over 30 to 40 minutes. Skip the rubbing and keep the damaged skin away from direct fire heat entirely. Be warned, the rewarming process is extraordinarily painful, which is why frontier doctors often just skipped straight to amputation. Cold weather could take your fingers, but the wildlife could take your life. And the advice for handling one of the most terrifying animals in North America was only half right. Number 6. Playing dead with every bear. Mountain men encountered grizzly bears across the northern Rockies on a regular basis. Jim Bridger had scars from bear encounters that he carried for the rest of his life. Hugh Glass nearly died from one. Jedediah Smith was attacked by a grizzly in the Black Hills in 1823 that ripped half his scalp off and tore his ear loose from his head, and his companions literally sewed it back on with a needle and thread in the field. Bears were a constant, terrifying reality of the fur trade, and the advice that filtered down through the generations was simple. If a bear attacks you, hit the ground, curl up, protect your neck, and play dead. For defensive grizzly attacks, where you've stumbled into a mother bear's space or surprised one feeding on a carcass, that advice is actually solid. A grizzly defending its territory will often lose interest once it decides you're no longer a threat. It might swat you around, bite you a couple of times, and walk off. Staying still and quiet can genuinely save your life in that scenario. But black bears operate on completely different logic. A black bear that comes after you is usually being predatory, not defensive. It's investigating you as a potential food source. Playing dead in front of a hungry predator is like putting yourself on a plate. Wildlife biologists with the Interagency Grizzly Bear Committee have documented that understanding the difference between species-specific behaviors has reduced severe mauling injuries by roughly 40% among trained backcountry users. The takeaway is critical. You need to identify which bear is in front of you before you decide what to do. Grizzly acting defensive, play dead. Black bear acting predatory, fight back with everything you've got and make yourself as big and loud as possible. Getting that backwards is how people die in bear country. The bear advice was half right, but this next trick, watching animals to figure out what's safe to eat, was wrong almost every time it mattered. Number 7. Eating whatever the animals eat. Fur trappers in the wilderness watched squirrels, birds, and deer to figure out what was safe to eat. If a bird was gobbling down a berry, that berry must be fine for humans too. The logic felt airtight, and when you're starving in the backcountry with no supplies, you'll follow any lead that looks promising. But birds can eat dozens of berries that would drop a grown man in hours. Their digestive systems process plant toxins through entirely different metabolic pathways than ours. Cedar waxwings gorge on berries from the nightshade family without any ill effect. A human eating the same handful could be dealing with organ failure by nightfall. Squirrels regularly eat amanita mushrooms, some of the most toxic fungi on the continent for humans. Deer browse on plants like water hemlock that have killed people within minutes of ingestion. The journals of fur trade era explorers are full of references to men getting violently ill from plants they assumed were safe because they'd watched animals eating them. If you don't know a plant with absolute certainty from your own training and experience, leave it alone. The calories you might gain are never worth the risk of spending your last hours in the backcountry in agony. If you're finding this useful, hit subscribe. I cover frontier history and survival every week, and the next few on this list might actually surprise you. We've covered the obvious myths, but this next group of tricks sounds so logical that you'd almost certainly fall for them in a real emergency. Number 8. Cauterizing wounds with gunpowder. This is the one that made Hugh Glass a legend. After the grizzly attack along the Grand River, Glass reportedly poured loose black gunpowder into his open wounds and lit it to cauterize the bleeding. The image is iconic. If you've ever seen Richard Harris crawling through the Dakota wilderness in Man in the Wilderness, or Robert Redford treating his own injuries in Jeremiah Johnson, you've seen some version of this technique played for maximum drama. It's brutal, it looks incredibly tough, and trappers across the fur trade swore by it. But cauterization with gunpowder destroys the healthy tissue surrounding the wound, the same tissue your body needs to actually heal. The black powder creates severe chemical and thermal burns on top of whatever injury you already have. Potassium nitrate, sulfur, and charcoal igniting against exposed muscle and connective tissue doesn't sterilize anything. It just adds a burn wound to an open wound, and it does very little to prevent infection, which was supposedly the whole point. Glass survived despite the gunpowder, not because of it. Modern wilderness first aid focuses on cleaning the wound with the cleanest water available, applying direct pressure with a cloth to control bleeding, and bandaging it to keep debris out. Leave the gunpowder for your rifle and focus on keeping the wound clean. Glass poured gunpowder in his wounds out of desperation, but the next frontier survival trick doesn't even have desperation as an excuse. Number 9. Drinking your own urine. This old frontier trick pops up everywhere, from mountain man campfire stories to modern survival television. The thinking is that urine is mostly water, so when you're desperate, it'll keep you hydrated. Trappers crossing the arid stretches between the Green River and the Great Salt Lake, or pushing through the dry passes of the Sierra Nevada with Jedediah Smith's expeditions, reportedly resorted to this when water sources ran dry. It sounds reasonable if you don't think about it too hard, but urine is your body's waste filtration output. It's concentrated with salts, urea, and metabolic toxins that your kidneys specifically removed from your blood. In a dehydrated person, urine is even more concentrated with waste, making the problem dramatically worse. You're essentially accelerating your own dehydration while convincing yourself you're solving it. The one useful thing urine can do in a survival scenario is cool you down. Soaking a cloth or article of clothing in it and wearing it wet provides evaporative cooling in hot desert conditions. But putting it in your mouth is a losing proposition every single time. Drinking urine would dehydrate you. But the next mistake on this list would freeze you. Number 10. Sleeping in a lean-to shelter. Every frontier illustration and survival manual features the classic lean-to. A few branches angled against a fallen log or a rock face, some pine boughs or leaves piled on top, and you've got yourself a shelter for the night. Mountain men built them constantly across the Rockies and the Appalachian backcountry because they were fast and easy to throw together after a long day of checking trap lines along frozen mountain streams. The problem is, a lean-to has one massive structural flaw. It's missing an entire wall. Your body heat radiates straight out the open front into the night air, and wind cuts through the gap with nothing to slow it down. In actual cold weather, when temperatures in the high Rockies drop below zero and the wind comes howling down off the peaks, a lean-to is barely better than sleeping in the open with a blanket over your head. What you actually need is a fully enclosed shelter with walls on all sides, a roof packed with insulating material, and a small doorway that you can block with a stuffed pack or a pile of branches. Think of a debris hut, basically a body-length cocoon of sticks, leaves, and pine needles that traps your body heat inside the way a sleeping bag does. It looks terrible. It's cramped and miserable. But it'll keep you alive through a frigid night in the backcountry in ways a lean-to simply cannot. The mountain men who actually survived long winters in the Rockies eventually figured this out too, which is why many of them switched to crude log cabins or adopted the teepee design from Native American communities, fully enclosed structures designed to retain heat efficiently. A bad shelter would freeze you slowly, but the next trick could cost you a limb in a matter of hours. Number 11. Slapping a tourniquet on every wound. Frontier medicine was rough, and the tourniquet was its favorite tool. A trapper takes a knife wound to the forearm during a scuffle at the rendezvous camp. and his buddy wraps a strip of leather above the wound and cranks it tight with a stick. Bleeding stops. Problem solved. But the records from frontier-era military surgeons tell a different story. Dr. John Sappington, who practiced medicine along the Missouri frontier in the 1830s, documented case after case of men who lost functional limbs, not from the original wound, but from tourniquets left on too long. A tourniquet cuts off all blood flow to everything below it. Leave it on for more than a couple of hours, and the tissue starts dying. Blood vessels collapse. Muscles begin breaking down, releasing toxins into the bloodstream. What started as a treatable wound becomes a conversation about amputation or worse. Tourniquets absolutely have their place, specifically when arterial bleeding is so severe that the person will bleed out without one. But for the vast majority of cuts, gashes, and lacerations, direct pressure with a clean cloth is enough. Hold firm pressure for 10 to 15 minutes without lifting the cloth to check, and most bleeding will slow or stop on its own. The tourniquet is a last resort for catastrophic bleeding, not a first response to every cut, and the mountain men who reached for one every time often paid for it with the limb they were trying to save. Frontier medicine could take your limb, but this last one, the most instinctive survival response of all, could take your life. Number 12. Walking to find help when you're lost. Mountain men like Jim Bridger and Kit Carson could navigate the entire Rocky Mountain West from memory. Bridger reportedly spoke 5 languages, could draw detailed maps of terrain he'd crossed a decade earlier, and is believed to be one of the first non-Native Americans to lay eyes on the Great Salt Lake. Kit Carson guided John Fremont's government expeditions across California, Oregon, and the Great Basin without a single modern navigation tool. These men walked because they knew exactly where they were going. They read the landscape the way you read a road sign. You almost certainly can't do that. And when someone gets lost in backcountry forest or mountain terrain and decides to walk out, they almost always make things dramatically worse. Walking without a clear destination burns calories you can't afford to lose, accelerates dehydration, increases the risk of falls and twisted ankles on uneven ground, and most critically, takes you further from the last place anyone knew to look for you. People who walk when lost tend to move in large circles without realizing it, covering miles of ground while getting nowhere. Search and rescue teams say it every single year. Stay where you are. Make yourself visible with bright clothing or gear. Make noise. Build a signal fire with green branches to create smoke if you can. The people looking for you are working from your last known position, and every mile you walk in the wrong direction is another mile they have to expand their search grid. The mountain men earned their navigation skills through years of living full-time in the wilderness, learning from Native American communities, and committing entire river systems to memory. Copying their confidence without their lifetime of experience is one of the fastest ways to turn a bad situation into a body recovery, and that's really the bigger lesson with all 12 of these tricks. The mountain men were not stupid. Guys like Bridger, Carson, and Jedediah Smith were among the most resourceful human beings who ever lived. They navigated thousands of miles of unmapped wilderness from memory, survived attacks from wildlife and hostile war parties, and built an entire industry in some of the most unforgiving terrain on the continent. But they were operating before germ theory, before anyone understood how hypothermia works at the cellular level, before modern trauma medicine existed. They did what they could with what they had, and a lot of them died doing it. Out of roughly 3,000 men who trapped beaver in the Rocky Mountains between 1820 and 1840, a staggering number never made it home. The ones who survived became legends, and their methods became gospel, even the methods that were flat out wrong. Because when a man crawls 200 miles with a broken leg and lives to tell the story, people tend to listen to everything he says, whether the science backs it up or not. Looking tough and staying alive are two very different things. The mountain men who actually made it to old age were the ones who learned the difference.